Have you ever walked away from a conversation feeling strangely heavy, even though nothing obviously bad happened? They didn't insult you. They didn't shout at you. They may have even smiled the entire time. Yet by the time you were alone again, you found yourself questioning your decisions, replaying everything you said, or feeling guilty for reasons you couldn't explain. You assume you're simply overthinking. But what if the conversation didn't reveal a weakness in you? What if it quietly transferred something from them to you? The confusing part is that these conversations rarely stand out while they're happening. In fact, they often feel completely normal. You listen, you explain yourself, you try to be understanding, you leave believing nothing unusual happened. Then, an hour later, your mood has changed. Your confidence feels smaller. Your mind keeps returning to the same exchange, searching for something you missed. If you've experienced this more than once, you've probably started asking yourself the wrong question. You wonder what's wrong with you, when the better question is what keeps happening inside those conversations that leaves you carrying a weight that wasn't there before. Most people believe these interactions affect them because they're too sensitive. They tell themselves they need thicker skin, more confidence, or better emotional control. But that's not what makes certain conversations linger long after they're over. The real difference is that not every conversation is simply an exchange of words. Some are quiet struggles over attention, certainty, guilt, and emotional responsibility. You don't leave feeling worse because you imagined something. You leave feeling worse because, without realizing it, the conversation slowly changed where your emotional weight was resting. The people who leave you feeling this way usually aren't controlling the conversation in obvious ways. They rarely tell you exactly what to think. Instead, they slowly shift your attention away from your own experience and toward theirs. Before you know it, you're defending decisions you never questioned, apologizing for needs you never thought were unreasonable, or carrying responsibility for emotions that were never yours to begin with. By the end of the conversation, they haven't necessarily changed your mind. They've changed where your mind is looking. One reason this feels so difficult to recognize is because emotionally healthy conversations usually leave you with more clarity than you had before. Even when they involve disagreement, you walk away understanding yourself a little better. But certain people create the opposite effect. The longer you speak, the less certain you become. Your own thoughts begin sounding less trustworthy than theirs. That isn't because they're always more intelligent or more persuasive. It's because some people instinctively create confusion first, knowing that confused people are far easier to influence than confident ones. The most unsettling part is that these people often leave you feeling responsible for what happened. You replay the conversation looking for the moment you became unreasonable. You wonder whether you misunderstood them, reacted too quickly, or expected too much. Meanwhile, they often seem perfectly calm. They move on with their day while you continue carrying the conversation inside your head. That's the hidden cost. Some people don't just occupy your time while you're with them. They continue occupying your mind long after they've already left. If you pay close attention, you'll notice that these conversations often follow the same invisible pattern. They begin with something small, a casual comment, a subtle criticism, a harmless question, nothing that seems worth reacting to. But instead of leaving you feeling understood, each exchange quietly moves you further away from yourself. You spend less time expressing what you actually feel and more time trying to prove that your feelings are valid. By the end, you're no longer having a conversation. You're defending your right to experience your own reality. This is why you can spend hours with someone who never raises their voice and still leave feeling emotionally exhausted. Manipulation isn't always loud. Sometimes it's simply the repeated experience of being pulled away from your own perspective. Every time you begin trusting your instincts, the conversation quietly redirects you back toward their interpretation instead. Over time, You stop noticing how often you're seeking permission to believe what you already felt before the conversation even began. The belief that keeps this cycle alive is surprisingly simple. You assume that if you can just explain yourself clearly enough, they'll finally understand you. So you give more context. You reveal more of your reasoning. You answer questions that never needed answering. But every explanation gives the conversation another opportunity to move further away from your reality and deeper into theirs. Without realizing it, you're no longer speaking to be understood. You're speaking in the hope that they'll finally allow you to stop defending yourself. At some point, you have to ask yourself a question that most people never consider. Why do you leave certain conversations feeling as though you've lost something, while other conversations leave you feeling more like yourself? The answer isn't simply that some people are negative. It's that some people unconsciously, or sometimes deliberately, make every interaction revolve around your uncertainty. They leave feeling lighter because they've handed you the emotional weight they didn't want to carry themselves. And because you naturally try to understand people, you accept it without realizing an exchange has taken place. Most people think the solution is to avoid difficult people altogether. But that's rarely possible. You'll meet them at work, in your family, in friendships, sometimes even in relationships that once felt safe. The real advantage isn't learning how to escape every emotionally draining conversation. It's learning to recognize the moment the conversation quietly stops being an exchange and starts becoming an invisible transfer of emotional responsibility. Because once you can see that shift happening, you no longer absorb it without question. The first step toward protecting yourself is realizing that not every feeling you leave with actually belongs to you. That sounds strange until you begin noticing the pattern. You enter the conversation feeling calm and certain. You leave feeling guilty, confused, responsible, or somehow inadequate, even though your circumstances haven't changed. The conversation didn't create those emotions from nothing. It simply encouraged you to carry burdens that were never yours in the first place. And once you recognize that possibility, you begin listening very differently. If you've spent years wondering why certain people seem to stay in your mind long after the conversation ends, you're not alone. Most people never realize how often they carry emotional weight that was never theirs to begin with. That's exactly why I wrote my private ebook, The Art of Strategic Indifference. It explores these patterns much more deeply and shows how to become emotionally independent without becoming emotionally distant. It's completely free. It's only available for viewers of this channel. And you'll find the link in the description if you'd like to continue exploring these ideas. Once you see this pattern, another question naturally appears. Why do these people seem unaffected while you're the one carrying the emotional aftermath? The answer is that emotionally healthy conversations usually end with both people taking responsibility for their own thoughts and feelings. But certain people unconsciously shift that balance. They leave with more certainty because they've quietly handed you their doubt, their frustration, or their guilt. You mistake empathy for responsibility, and by the time the conversation ends, you're carrying emotional weight that was never meant to become yours. This is also why arguing rarely fixes these interactions. You assume the problem is that they don't have enough information, so you offer more explanations, more evidence, and more honesty. But if the conversation is quietly built around making you question yourself, then no amount of explanation will ever feel like enough. Every answer simply creates another question. Every clarification invites another doubt. Eventually, you stop trying to understand the other person and start trying to earn the right to trust your own perception again. The strange thing is that the more emotionally aware you are, the easier this pattern can become to miss. You genuinely want to understand people. You look for context instead of jumping to conclusions. You give others the benefit of the doubt because you know everyone carries unseen struggles. Those qualities are strengths, but in the wrong conversation, they can quietly become openings. Someone else's lack of self-awareness slowly becomes your responsibility to manage, while your own emotional clarity fades into the background. Eventually, you realize that protecting your peace has less to do with ending conversations and more to do with noticing when a conversation quietly stops, respecting your reality. The moment you find yourself repeatedly explaining feelings you were already certain about, apologizing for boundaries that once felt reasonable, or leaving with questions you didn't have before, pause. Not because you've proven yourself wrong, but because something more important may be happening. The conversation may no longer be helping you understand the truth. It may be teaching you to distrust yourself. There's another pattern that's easy to overlook. The people who consistently leave you feeling worse rarely force you to ignore yourself. They simply reward you every time you do it voluntarily. They seem warmer when you agree, more comfortable when you stay quiet, more approving when you put your own needs aside. Over time, your mind begins associating self-abandonment with harmony. You don't even notice you're making the trade anymore. You only notice that every conversation leaves you feeling a little further away from the person you were before it began. The people who have the strongest emotional boundaries often do something that seems almost effortless. They pay close attention to how they feel after an interaction, not just during it. They understand that the real meaning of a conversation is often revealed only after it ends. If they consistently leave someone feeling calmer, clearer, and more themselves, they lean into that relationship. But if they repeatedly leave feeling smaller, confused, or emotionally burdened, they stop asking whether they're simply overreacting and start asking a far more useful question. What does this interaction keep teaching me to feel about myself? That question quietly changes everything because it shifts your attention away from judging isolated conversations and toward recognizing consistent patterns. One difficult conversation can happen with anyone. Stress, grief, exhaustion, and misunderstanding are part of being human. But when you repeatedly leave the same person feeling guilty, mentally exhausted, less confident, or strangely disconnected from yourself, you're no longer looking at a bad day. You're looking at a relationship that is gradually shaping the way you experience yourself. And that's a pattern too important to ignore. The biggest shift happens when you stop measuring people by how enjoyable they are to talk to and start measuring them by who you become after speaking with them. Some people leave you feeling more thoughtful, more grounded, and more certain of yourself. Others leave you doubting your memory, questioning your intentions, or carrying emotions that weren't there an hour earlier. That difference is rarely accidental. The emotional state you repeatedly leave with is often the clearest reflection of what a relationship is, quietly teaching your nervous system to accept as normal. From that point on, your goal stops being to make every conversation feel good. Some of the healthiest conversations you'll ever have will be uncomfortable because they challenge you without diminishing you. The difference is that honest conversations leave you with greater clarity even when they hurt. Manipulative conversations leave you with greater confusion even when they appear polite. Once you understand that distinction, you stop judging people by how comfortable they make you feel in the moment. You begin judging them by whether you understand yourself more clearly after they've gone. Eventually, you discover that emotional independence isn't just about saying no, setting boundaries, or becoming less available. It's about refusing to let someone else's emotional state quietly become your own. You can listen without absorbing. You can care without carrying. You can understand without surrendering your own perspective. The moment you stop believing that every uncomfortable feeling after a conversation must belong to you, you begin reclaiming something many people lose without ever noticing: the ability to leave an interaction still feeling like yourself. There's one final realization that ties all of this together. The people who consistently leave you feeling worse don't necessarily have the greatest influence over your life. They simply have the greatest influence over your attention. And attention is where your emotional energy follows. The moment you become conscious of that, you stop asking, "Why do I always feel worse after talking to them?" and begin asking a far more powerful question. Why am I allowing this conversation to continue shaping how I see myself after it has already ended? That question doesn't just change your conversations. It changes the relationship you have with your own mind. And perhaps that's why the strongest people aren't the ones who never encounter manipulative conversations. They're the ones who stop carrying those conversations home with them. They understand that every interaction deserves reflection, but not permanent residence inside their mind. They no longer replay every sentence searching for hidden mistakes or trying to earn someone else's approval after the fact. Instead, they quietly ask one simple question: did this conversation help me become more connected to myself, or did it slowly pull me away from who I already knew I was? The answer tells them far more about the relationship than the conversation ever could. The surprising thing is that once you begin seeing these patterns, you don't become colder, you become more selective. You stop measuring the quality of a relationship by how long you've known someone or how often you speak. Instead, you pay attention to something far more revealing. You notice what consistently happens inside you after every interaction, because the people who deserve a place in your life don't leave you questioning your reality. They leave you feeling calmer, clearer, and more connected to the person you already are. The real freedom isn't reaching a point where nobody can affect your emotions. That's impossible. The real freedom is becoming aware of which emotions genuinely belong to you and which ones were quietly handed to you during the conversation. Once you learn that distinction, you stop automatically accepting every feeling as evidence that you've done something wrong. Sometimes the discomfort you're carrying isn't a message that you need to change. Sometimes it's simply the emotional residue of spending too much time inside someone else's reality. What changes most is not the people around you. It's the standard you use to evaluate their place in your life. You stop asking whether someone is entertaining, charismatic, or even kind in isolated moments. You begin asking whether repeated conversations with them strengthen your clarity or quietly erode it. Because over time, every relationship teaches you something about yourself. The healthiest ones reinforce your trust in your own judgment. The unhealthy ones slowly replace that trust with doubt. And the sooner you recognize the difference, the less of yourself you'll lose, trying to understand people who were never trying to understand you in return. The people who quietly protect their peace all seem to discover the same truth sooner or later. Every conversation leaves something behind. It either leaves you with greater trust in yourself or greater dependence on someone else's interpretation of reality. Once you begin noticing that pattern, you stop chasing closure from every difficult interaction. You stop believing you have to solve every misunderstanding or convince every person to see your side. Sometimes the healthiest decision is simply recognizing that the conversation has already given you the answer. Not through what they said, but through who you became while speaking to them. And maybe that's the deepest shift of all. You stop treating every difficult conversation as a puzzle that needs solving and start treating it as information. Not information about whether you're good enough, kind enough, or understanding enough, but information about the relationship itself. Some people repeatedly leave you feeling stronger because they respect your reality even when they disagree with it. Others repeatedly leave you feeling smaller because your certainty becomes the price of keeping the conversation comfortable. Once you recognize that difference, you no longer need every interaction to end well. You simply need it to leave you still trusting yourself. The irony is that the more you trust yourself, the less power these conversations begin to have. Not because people suddenly change, but because you stop giving every interaction the authority to redefine how you see yourself. You still listen. You still stay open to being wrong, but you no longer assume that feeling guilty, confused, or emotionally burdened automatically means you've made a mistake. Sometimes, it simply means you've spent time with someone who benefits when you doubt yourself. And recognizing that difference is one of the quietest forms of psychological freedom you can develop. The goal was never to become suspicious of everyone you meet. It was to become aware of yourself while you're with them. The strongest form of emotional independence isn't learning how to read every person's intentions perfectly. It's noticing whether repeated conversations consistently move you closer to your own clarity or further away from it. Because once you start paying attention to that pattern, something quietly changes forever. You stop choosing relationships based only on who enjoys your company. You begin choosing them based on who helps you leave each conversation still feeling like yourself. The people who influence you most are rarely the ones who speak the loudest. They're the ones whose conversations quietly become the voice inside your own head after they're gone. That's why protecting your peace has never been about avoiding difficult people. It's about deciding whose perspective deserves to remain with you once the conversation ends. Because every person leaves an echo. The question is whether that echo strengthens your trust in yourself or slowly teaches you to question the person you were before you walked into the room. And when you begin living this way, you notice something unexpected. You stop leaving conversations desperate to know whether the other person approves of you. Instead, you become curious about something far more valuable. Did you stay connected to your own judgment from beginning to end? Because that is the quiet difference between emotional dependence and emotional independence. One constantly looks outward for reassurance after every interaction. The other leaves the conversation still grounded in itself. And once you experience that kind of stability, you realize it was never the other person you were searching for all along. It was the ability to trust your own mind without needing someone else to confirm it. The strongest people eventually realize that peace is not created by winning every conversation. It's created by refusing to let every conversation become a verdict on your worth. Once you stop carrying other people's doubts, projections, and emotional burdens as though they belong to you, something quietly changes. You begin leaving interactions with your energy still intact. Your mind becomes quieter, your judgment becomes clearer, and instead of asking why certain people always make you feel worse, you begin asking whether they still deserve the privilege of shaping how you feel at all. The final step is realizing that your emotional state after a conversation is not just a feeling, it's feedback. Not every conversation deserves equal access to your mind. Not every opinion deserves equal weight. And not every relationship deserves unlimited influence over how you see yourself. The people worth keeping close are not the ones who leave you constantly analyzing yourself after every interaction. They're the ones who leave you with greater clarity, greater peace, and a stronger connection to your own judgment. Once you begin choosing people by that standard, you don't just protect your energy, you protect the person you're becoming. Perhaps that's why the most emotionally resilient people don't ask after every conversation, "Did they understand me?" They ask, "Do I still understand myself?" That single question quietly changes everything. Because once your own clarity becomes more valuable than someone else's approval, manipulative conversations begin losing their power. You no longer leave every interaction carrying emotions that were never yours to begin with. You leave knowing that protecting your peace isn't about avoiding people. It's about refusing to surrender your own perspective every time someone invites you to doubt it. If this video helped you see your conversations differently, remember that your goal isn't to avoid people. It's to stop leaving interactions further away from yourself than when they began. If you'd like to explore these ideas more deeply, I've written a free private ebook called The Art of Strategic Indifference. It's for people who want to become emotionally independent, psychologically resilient, and difficult to manipulate, and you'll find it in the description. I'm also curious to hear your experience. What's one conversation that changed the way you saw someone forever? If you genuinely found value in this video, consider leaving a like. And if you're interested in psychology, emotional independence, strategic thinking, human nature, power dynamics, discipline, and self-mastery, subscribe because every video builds on the last. The next recommended video expands this philosophy even further, so keep watching. And if you want to explore the deepest ideas behind these patterns, you'll also find my Patreon in the description. It's where I share private observations, psychological breakdowns, and longer explorations that aren't structured for public platforms. Think of it as a private circle for people who genuinely want to master these concepts. Both the free ebook and Patreon are linked in the description.